Welcome everybody to our new AD Q&A. We do have some slides that everybody's compiled just with some additional information. But like we ask you to do an AD meeting today, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat because I'm not running the AirPod today. So feel free to go ahead and type questions in the chat. It'll probably be faster for you to do that than to try to come off mute and ask questions unless we ask you to. And we're going to go ahead and start with a little bit of information about LTI as soon as Emily, like we told you in the AD meeting, we have to switch recordings and everything, so it always takes a couple seconds. While we're waiting, did anybody have any hot burning questions that you are dying to ask right now? We can get started with questions and then go ahead and sure. Okay. So Selena asked, if a teacher's classes are not showing in RISE, what's the first troubleshooting step? Well, generally the first thing to check is make sure the teacher's Cactus ID is connected to their courses. That's the very first thing we check in Tide. And also make sure that their Cactus ID is connected in your SIS system. Like Maureen said, everything comes from your SIS system, but occasionally there will be something that you'll see that the Cactus ID, for whatever reason, somebody forgot to put it in or they missed it somehow.
Also in their user account. A teacher's SSID needs to be in their user account in Tide in order for their students to connect to them. And I see sometimes when people add new users, they forget to put that Cactus ID in.
Yeah, you've got to put the Cactus ID in Tide as well. The Cactus ID is in Aspire, but you need to go to Tide and check to make sure that that teacher's Cactus ID is showing up in Tide as well.
Follow up on that. If we have teachers that came from another district, I know you mentioned it this morning, what's the process do we contact that district and say, we need you to remove them?
A lot of times we get those emails, Jeff, the people will email us and say, such and such is still there. If you know who they are, you're welcome to contact them yourself and just say, hey, I need you to switch this. Occasionally, if you don't get a response, please email Elise or myself, because we can go in, for RISE especially, we can go in and we can help you with that. But oftentimes, but usually, if you know who they are, it's better to just say, hey, please fix that. Oh yeah, there's always a few. This time of year there absolutely is. Ashley asks, where do I go to get access to a WIDA screener for a student? And only if the screener shows they need further testing, then we do the WIDA testing. Is that correct? Access, Megan is not here right now.
I am now. I jump on.
Okay. Did you hear the question, hon?
Can you repeat it really quickly, please?
I will. Where do I go to get access to a WIDA screener for a student? And then the question says, and second part, and only if the screener shows, sorry, just flipped. And only if the screener shows they need the further testing, then we do the WIDA testing. Is that correct?
Okay, great question, Ashley. So screener data, we are just starting to compile and have available in the data gateway. If the screener test is not in the student's cumulative file when they transfer from school to school, you could always reach out to me and I can see if I can find it. But like I said, it's sometimes hard because how LEAs enter them into AMS, it gets a little messy and sloppy. Wow. So I can look. Your best bet is to reach out to the LEA they transferred from to get that screener information. If there is no screener information and the data gateway doesn't show any access testing, and basically you can see like there's no history of any WIDA assessments, then the student should be screened. If they qualify for services, then they would need to take the annual access test. Again, the screener is just a one-time test to qualify for services, and then the WIDA access, that is given annually until the student reaches proficiency, at which point they exit EL status and they are monitored for 4 years. So you can reach out to myself and I can maybe help a little or reach out directly to the LEA the student transferred from.
Okay. Another question in the chat, and then we'll go to the PowerPoint, is the question about same question for a teacher but not able to see your classes in Utah Compose. Generally with Utah Compose, the problem is that you probably need to go in and reset your Utrex upload, because if they're not seeing current classes for this year, you might want to first check, as Maureen highlighted in her slides today, go to your Utrex, go to the data gateway, look at your Utrex upload and check to see if you have a stale upload. The reset isn't showing in my Utrex. Selena, send Maureen and I an email and we can do some research. We'll need the teacher's Cactus ID so that we can look to see what's going on with that teacher for
Actually,
Utah Compose.
She did send me an email a little bit earlier. I just got done checking. Your teacher information looks great from where I'm sitting. I think we just are still working on getting those Utah Compose up and running. So you might just have to wait a couple of days.
Yeah.
And then you'll see all your complete information there. I didn't see your reset button in the data gateway either, which makes me think you've probably been reset already.
It could be. A lot of people are really aware of it and have started setting it. The other thing with Utah Compose, like we told you, they've done some server work. And so it could be that the delay is because we're still doing the allow list with their new SFPT. So if Monday the teacher still can't see it, let me know, Selena, because that's generally it takes about 48, 72 hours at the very most at the beginning of the year. So let's go ahead and get started on Welcome to Assessment. I think the first person is LTI. We're talking about Apple.
Okay. So to add to what I shared this morning, this next slide provides very similar information to what I shared, with the exception of the second to last or third to last bullet there, which talks about requiring headphones and microphones. If you are unaware with the Apple Test Administration, there are 4 different components, and one of them is a speaking and listening component, which requires the student to speak into a microphone in the target language in which they are enrolled for the DLI program. And when your students go to use these, it is, I want to fall short of saying required, but it's way more than strongly recommended that you not use generic brand headsets and microphones for this particular situation, especially if you have Apple devices. If you're using Mac devices, you will run into problems. If you are using, and I was a classroom teacher, I'm totally drawn to the earbuds that I get on the internet when I get 5,000 for like $27. That's not what you want to do for Apple administration. Your students are going to have struggles and it's going to be frustrating. So make sure that you are using high quality accessories to go with your devices there. And at the same time, it is imperative that when they are doing the speaking portion, that they are all but isolated. It is incredibly difficult for the Apple raters to score your students when they hear multiple voices. Now, as a teacher, you can always go on and review. And a lot of times we get responses from teachers that say, I don't understand why my student didn't receive a score. I can hear them speaking clearly, but you also know Sally's voice. The rater does not. And if they hear multiple voices, they cannot rate it, even if one is stronger than the other. Okay. So the fewer students you have taking the speaking listening portion at one time, the better, because it's just going to provide a more seamless administration experience for your students and cause a lot less frustration, because if they end up having to retake it, you never know if it's going to be better or worse than it was the first time. Okay. The next slide actually gives you the breakdown of the 4 components. A lot of times our new assessment directors or those who work with DLI students are unsure of how to administer them, if it needs to be a battery, if it needs to be individual, and that is a local decision. It's up to you. You can administer them individually over the course of multiple days, or you can pull a kit all day. But again, think about what's best for the student in that situation. Maybe not necessarily what's most convenient for the teacher at the time, because some of them are a little more lengthy and require the student to put forth a lot more of their cognitive efforts, especially the presentational writing piece, because then they are typing in their target language, not just in English. The next slide is the people that you can reach out to if you ever need help with Apple support. There is the Apple Support Help Desk, which has an email as well as a 1-800 number. We have our dual language immersion specialist here at USBE, who is Carl Bowman. Myself, who's over test administration, data management or rostering would be Maureen. Accommodations is Jessica, and any testing ethics questions can be directed to Kim. I would also say to our newer assessment directors, a lot of times you might look at this and go, oh, we have a dual immersion program in my LEA, but I'm not over it, so I don't need to worry about this. But could you please pass it on to the person who does? Because sometimes that's a surprise to them, because we share the information with you and they didn't get it. So if you're not the DLI person for your LEA, that's great, especially with some of our larger LEAs. There's a DLI specialist who is not the assessment director, but some of you do wear those multiple hats. But if you are not the DLI specialist and you have a DLI coordinator who would be over this, please pass this information on to them as well so that they can be a part of it. The next section we're going to go over again is just UTIPS. I talked about this again earlier this morning. It is a tool that is available for all teachers, K through 12. Teachers can use a testing pool. They can create their own. It's really nice. Go ahead and go to the next slide. It gives you an idea of what types of items there are. This is just a quick snapshot, but I would strongly encourage you to attend the training that's in a couple of weeks. Oh, not even a couple. This one's right next week. And I will be able to really dive in and show you how all of these tools work. Okay. Similar with all of our other testing vendors, go ahead and go to the next slide. UTIPS loads through UTrex, okay, which means that it is realistically, even at its best, unavailable the first 3 days of school. And that's at its best, friends, at its best. It's unavailable the first 3 days of school. That's if everything is working as it's supposed to work. So if you're not seeing teachers, if you're not seeing courses, take a deep breath. Send me an email. I might tell you to wait a few days. I might be able to say, you know what? Yep, there's a problem. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. When it comes to these though, your teacher, just like with our other vendors, they need to have their Cactus number assigned to their user account or it's not going to sync. Their courses aren't going to show up. If you need help or support with UTIPS, the next slide has a link to the UTIPS wiki I shared earlier, as well as the email for the UTIPS support and my own email. Big fat secret, the UTIPS support, UTIPS help email just forwards to my email. So it's not someone else sitting behind the UTIPS help support email account. It just forwards to me. So it's not that one of those is going to get you an answer faster than one or the other. And please don't email both, because then I'll just get it twice. I'll go ahead and stop here for a minute. If there are questions for Apple or for UTIPS specifically, before I move on to like Rise and Utah Aspire Plus. No questions. Okay. So for Rise, students who take Rise are the majority of your 3rd through 8th grade students, with the exception of if they have received the parental exclusion letter, or with writing, that's only assessed in grades 5 and 8, and it's not happening this year. So don't stress.
Some of it.
Some of it is,
Yes.
but you don't have benchmarks. And then science, the difference here is it's grades 4 through 8. Your 3rd graders do not take the science test. There are 4 different types of tests that are provided through the Rise portal. The training tests are provided for all students, all users, all teachers. You can even show it to parents. There's actually 2 different versions of the training test. One is completely public and you can do it on pretty much any device. The other mirrors the test administration in that you will provide them with a live code. The students will log in with their SSID and their first name. It's a great way to help prepare students with the format and the process of testing. The other option with Rise, the Rise portal assessments are the Rise benchmark modules. We mentioned earlier today that the ELA ones are not available until September 7th, but math and science are open and ready right now. There for the Rise interim, no science or writing and no ELA for just this year. They will resume 25-26. And then we have the summative test, which is the one given spring at the very end. I have had a lot of questions already. What's the difference between the summative and the mid-year summative? And the difference is the course end date for the instruction the student is enrolled. We see this a lot more in secondary mathematics, specifically grades 7 and 8, sometimes even in grade 6, where a student is accelerating through the instruction, and so they may take Math 7 in the first semester of the school year. That means that they need to take the Math 7 summative test in that mid-year summative window, because then their Math 8 instruction that continues the second semester will trigger the Math 8 summative test in the spring. Okay, so just be aware of that. Not everybody takes a mid-year summative. It's only those students who are on an adjusted or accelerated track for completing instruction. And generally, like I said, this happens in math, but I'm not going to say it's never happened in another content area. We just see it more.
We have a question. Is it the training test or the benchmark teachers can walk through with their
Great
students?
question. The training tests are the ones you can walk through with your students while they are taking it. The benchmark you can review with your students once they have submitted for reporting. The next slide that I've provided in the deck is just the windows for the benchmarks and the interims. These are also provided in the Assessment Director Resource Guide, which is, in all honesty, probably going to become one of your very best friends. You're going to reference it a lot. And then the next slide is just the summative window. The final slide for RISE is your help and support slide. I've put the RISE help desk email as well as their 1-877 number. For test administration, you would want to contact me, again, with rostering or data management. Reach out to Maureen. Accommodations would be Jessica.
I'm answering it right now.
Cool.
The question is, and what is a benchmark preview best used for? And I'm typing the question. Benchmark preview is designed for teachers to use to preview the content before you give the test to your students, because you're not supposed to, other than for a summative test, actually give your students a test that you actually don't know what you're giving them. So preview was designed so that teachers could actually go through and experience and review the items before you give the benchmark module to your students. And the thing that's cool about it is that by doing that, you can also identify areas where you think certain students will struggle, or item types where there could be some problems, especially because we recommend every student take a training test before they take a benchmark, and they may take training tests multiple times through the year. With a benchmark preview, it's a great idea for teachers to kind of discuss. This may be an area where our students are going to struggle because they struggle with drag and drop questions, or they struggle with certain things, so that you're aware of the item types that you can go to the training test and work with them on that as well as the content. Preview is not used to put up in front of a classroom to preview the questions with your students. It is absolutely in the test administration manual that is not what it's supposed to be used for. So.
The limited phone calls I get on science ones, because sometimes especially our elementary teachers don't understand the question themselves. Get in preview where they can look at the rationale and scoring and go, oh, that's why that's the right answer. And I don't get phone calls going, this doesn't align to the standard. Yes, it does. Let's walk through the preview and I'll show you how.
The other benefit to doing the RISE training test, the secure one specifically, is outlined in the RISE resources. You can set certain accommodations so that students can get familiar with those. The students who require certain accommodations for their IEP of core plans, they can do that prior to the summative. So that is significantly important to certain students.
And we highly recommend it. And in fact, if you're going to be a school that's going to be doing remote administration, you actually need to log into the secure training test and actually practice with your students for that very reason, because that's the easiest way to practice the remote administration, is to do it securely and use the remote proctoring functionality.
After administering a benchmark, and then you're reviewing it with the students, it's okay to put it up on a screen or something like that, but you wouldn't print it out and look at it that way.
No.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, usually what we actually have a whole PowerPoint that we show everybody how to do this appropriately. You never want to reveal student, data privacy, but you can actually put up the items and just talk about, this is how most people scored. This is how, this is what we did, and actually look and go through the questions and talk about misconceptions, but only after the students have taken the test.
Here's a plug for my training.
Yeah.
I'll show you that.
Because Ashley requests, I feel like I make the game, but there are a lot of program acronyms. Data Gateway. Data Gateway isn't an acronym. It actually is the Data Gateway, just so you know. Move It is, Move It's an acronym. It just means move your IT files. UTREX stands for Utah's
Exchange.
transcript exchange. Then Aspire. Utah Aspire Plus is the actual name of the test. Aspire, just so you know, because why would we have anything that wasn't the same name? Aspire is actually the state-sponsored grade book. So whenever you're emailing us, and this is a really good tip for everyone, we get lots of email or phone calls sometimes, and our receptionist has been trained really well for this in our office, but people will call and say, I have a question about Aspire. And they're used to now saying, do you mean the test or the grade book? Or the SIS system. So when you refer to Aspire, please say Utah Aspire Plus. When Maureen and Elise and I go to the TCC meetings, that's one of the biggest gripes, by the way, your IT people have in your districts, because they even said, do not call it Aspire. It makes us crazy. Like it's called, you can call it UA Plus or Utah Aspire Plus. There is a quick bulleted list. You know what? Ashley, I think that's a good idea. I think we used to have one. I will go through and see if we can find it, and maybe we can create a new acronym alphabet soup list. 75 pages long. It could be 75 pages long, like Maureen just said. Work on it. Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Go ahead, Elise.
All right, so for Utah Aspire Plus, go ahead and go to the next slide. Utah Aspire Plus differs from RISE in that it is an end of grade test, so it is administered to 9th and 10th graders, whereas RISE is end of course, okay? Utah Aspire Plus is also fixed form as opposed to computer adaptive. They're rostered straight through UTREX. What you'll want to do though with Utah Aspire Plus, something that we don't see as much with RISE, is paying very close attention to your students who are duly enrolled, because the tiebreak rules on where they are supposed to test can be a little bit tricky. And if you have questions, you can reach out to Maureen and I, and we can kind of help you figure that out. But a little hint here with one of our ADAM enhancements, they may have figured out a way to help you with this. I'm very excited to see what transpires with the dually enrolled students. So look forward to that. When it comes to testing times, that's timed through the system. The only difference here is English is not going to exist anymore. So that 45 minutes, you can just strike through in your brain. Math is still limited to 75, science 60, reading 75. It's a hybrid test. That's why it's called the Utah Aspire ACT, okay? Because 50% of the items are from our Utah Test Bank and the other 50% are from the ACT Aspire Bank, okay? They are combined together to provide a predictive ACT score for the ACT, as well as to measure growth between 9th and 10th grade. The test window itself opens in early March, so it is earlier than the RISE test window, and closes May 9th. And I'm going to need to call on lovely colleagues who know these better off the top of their head. I know that instant reporting is not available for one of our contents, right?
For ELA.
Just ELA. Okay.
Reading.
All of the other ones you will still be able to
Specifically
get
reading.
within. Oh, in reading?
Yeah, reading.
Just reading.
Sorry,
Because we keep calling it ELA, but yes,
Yeah.
reading.
Yes, thank you, Megan.
So we can take that
So-
English one off there. It was 45 minutes long. It's 0 minutes now.
And so you will still be able to, within the next 24 hours, log into the ADAM system to see your reporting for math and science the following day. Reading will have a delay in your scoring. Okay, so make sure you're messaging that to your teachers, because they were so excited to have immediate scoring, and I don't blame them, or at least 24-hour scoring. I don't want to say immediate, but that will not be available for reading. When it comes to Utah Aspire Plus help and support, Pearson has a help number that you can reach out to as well as an email. I've also put mine and Maureen's and Jessica's up there. And I'm hoping that by listing them all multiple times with what we do, you can start to separate it out in your brain. If you send me an email that asks about accommodations, I'm happy to forward it to Jessica. But just know, if you email the correct person the first time, you're going to get your answer a lot more quickly. But we know who does what, and we forward it on if there is confusion. If you have other questions for Rise or Utah Aspire Plus, you're welcome to drop them in the chat and I can address them. And we can, I'm pretty sure those are all of my slides.
Okay, Tracy and Jessica.
Okay.
What?
Okay, go to the next slide. Okay, this is just a recap of some resources that we shared in our first meeting that we find probably most important to you that I would bookmark, especially if you're new, because you will be referencing these throughout the year. Okay.
We really don't have any like
think
new
that's it.
information. I
Yeah.
mean, it just is.
That's right.
Did
Did anyone have any questions for Jessica and Tracy from our accommodations? You know, we had this kind of speed through that. If anybody has any questions or concerns, feel free to type those in the chat as well. And then of course we do have the what do you need to do. So
Yeah, and I think one of the things to be important is you guys have learned, you guys see things, patterns that happen, errors that are made in critical ways. Maybe you could talk about some of those for this group.
We get a lot of teachers and sometimes from the director end, right? It's in the student's IEP, right? As an accommodation, that means we have to do it. And especially when it comes to assessment. So I think Jessica covered that. It's just that reminder that when it comes to our assessments, even if it's in a student's IEP and it's not an allowable accommodation for that assessment, they cannot use it. Right, we reference back to that IDA component where it's very clearly states that states determine accommodations that don't invalidate an assessment and IEP teams, right, select those accommodations. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that we get.
And then the reverse is also true. Another thing that gets smeared around as a myth is it's sometimes stated, and this is not correct, that, oh, they cannot use certain accommodations on statewide assessments, therefore they do not allow students to use them instructionally, and that is not appropriate. There are certain accommodations that students can have access to just because they're not allowed on a statewide assessment. There might be tools that students are using when they're learning new concepts and standards for the state, and that's okay. We want students to do that. And I go back to the example I gave earlier, such as a calculator. Maybe in fourth grade, you used a lot of manipulatives with a student who is struggling with basic computation and you introduce them to a calculator. That's okay as a learning instructional tool. Just at that grade level, it's not allowed on statewide assessment. So.
Yeah, 3-5 calculators is the big one. Manipulatives, right? I think we call them visual representations. Those are allowable. So teach kids how to use those. They can use like scratch paper. The other thing is Scribe. Scribe is an allowable accommodation, and every year, I've been doing this, 8 years now? 8 years, I have said that the students will receive the score they earn. Every year I get the same emails that if they use Scribe, they get an automatic 1. No, that is not true. So, so Scribe, it's an allowable. If it's in that chart, it says it's allowable. The students earn the score that they earn.
Yeah, what I would really urge you to do if you're a new assessment director, especially if you don't have a background in special education, is to review our accommodations policy and review what accommodations and resources are outlined. And if you don't automatically know what that accommodation or resource is in your mind, email us, because sometimes in certain aspects of the systems, I can log in from my state account and see what accommodations have been applied to students. And I can automatically know instances where big errors have happened. there were in certain districts last year, Braille was assigned to like hundreds of students in one district. Well, we don't even have a dozen students in the state that use that. So I knew that was a significant error. Or another big error is screen readers. There's a misconception about what a screen reader is. So if there's anything that you do not understand as an assessment director and can't speak to it at your LEA, email me, communicate with your special education director to become familiar with what all those different options are for students.
We have some questions. Do we need manipulatives added to the accommodations, or is that universal?
No, that is an accommodation. So if students, but so the key is, and we've really been trying to get this home, is we have IEP teams putting assessment at those beginning stages, right? And that is not how this works. And we will talk about this again with special ed directors, right? Like teams need to determine what accommodations a student needs in order for them to access, right, the core content, right? Their instructional core content. Then from there, depending on what they're using, right, for instruction, then we look at how that fits into assessment. And so, so that's really kind of a really big important piece. So if, for example, yes, you have students who they're using a calculator instructionally in grades 3-5, which we don't recommend, right? You may need to consider as an IEP team adding, right, another way for them to access that too. What about 4-6 AOL?
Bree had a quick question. Let's let Bree answer this question. The rest of these are Grant for action.
My question is just if the read aloud accommodation is still allowed for Acadians math this year?
It is.
It is?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And is that something that needs to be in their IEP or
Yes.
can that be universal?
Nope, it is an
Okay.
accommodation only. Yep.
Perfect.
Good question. Yeah,
And
great
that's also
question.
marked in the ALO system. If you use the read aloud accommodation on that screen where it says what's the accommodation used, you say yes, other, read aloud.
Okay, perfect.
Another question, what about in 4th to 6th for ALO with it not being state required? If an LAA chooses to assess, do they still need to follow accommodations as per the other grades?
Yes, and so the way accommodations work, it applies to your LEA assessments as well, right? So if you go in and start administering Acadians, right, with those non-allowable accommodations and you're entering data, like you're disservicing yourself, right? So like it doesn't change. It doesn't change from there. If any of you guys are also doing any of your own formative assessment systems, right? Like those vendors, like you'll work out through them what accommodations are allowed and not allowed. And those should all be things that are taken into consideration during IEP meetings.
She said, asking because I have had a situation where a SPED teacher told me they can use a calculator on the ALO math because it isn't a required test in 4th through 6th.
Nope. So you'll just follow those same guidelines with Acadians, right? It doesn't change. Yeah, from there. Awesome. I'm trying to think what else, big ones.
Yeah, so while you're thinking, one of the things that resources that I still reference, I've been involved in assessment formally since at least 2011, and then here at the state for 7 years almost, and I still reference the Utah Participation Accommodations Policy document that's available on our website. So that's something I would bookmark as a new assessment director, because a lot of these questions that we have here, some of them can be answered just in that document by looking at the assessment and the accommodations that are allowable. And obviously, if not, you can certainly reach out to our team. Or sometimes they're nuanced and it's hard to tell whether the answer, what the answer is to the question that you've got at your table that day. And certainly we can provide support to that as well.
And that's where those charts, so bringing those appendices and really spelling out, like if you do Acadians, go to those appendices, print them out, right? Like teachers should have those. I recommend having them during IEP meetings. The other thing we get to, one thing to think about is as you have students, right, that are sent to the computer lab or the library or a different teacher, we quite often field calls where we get calls from them and they just get handed a list of accommodations. right? So like I've literally had teachers email me, hi, this teacher walked in and here's the list of all the accommodations that the students are supposed to get. And they screenshotted, copy and paste out of the IEP. And it was all things, a lot of things that are not allowed in assessment, right? So like really ensuring that our special ed teachers, right, are helping your test administrators and you have a process and something in place to help those guys, because that is one that we see quite often.
Well, it's also a team effort. It doesn't all fall on the shoulders of a special education teacher. We have students who receive services that are sitting in general education classrooms, so there cannot be ignorance from the general education teachers that are responsible for providing accommodations, and their input is important and warranted for student needs. And especially our administrators that are sitting at the table at the IEP meetings and they're signing the document that, yes, we're going to provide these services to the students. They need to be familiar and they should be aware of what our state policies are, so that when they are saying yes to the parents, we will do this for your student, they know what they're signing to.
Okay.
The other thing I would say to this top discussion we've had with special education, it applies broader, but you can see the importance of having good communication. If you're in a district or charter school where the person over special ed, and hopefully you are, some of you are not, but person over special ed, person over assessment are different people, that you have good communication lines between the two of you to share information. And the Making Connections event that we have next month is designed for that very purpose, to bring groups together who have common interests and responsibilities around measuring our students' learning.
Yeah, the only other thing off the top of my head that I'm also thinking about is just to be aware of your different assessments, what your windows are for ordering certain materials. Go into those specific test administration manuals and know when those are, and maybe put place markers on your calendar soon, so that you're aware of when you need to order certain things for students. Like, for example, Utah Aspire Plus will have an order window in the spring. So if you need a student who needs large print or a Braille test, that you know when that window is and you've got that reminder in place to place those orders.
So I think the only other thing, one more thing that I think this is really important. So if you find yourself or you get a call from a school in the middle of a testing situation and you've discovered that, one, you have an accommodation that you haven't set, right? Students started testing, we didn't set the accommodation, or we've got them using something they shouldn't. So at any point you get into a testing situation and something is not right, please stop down, call Jessica, call myself. Depending on where you're at in that process, sometimes we can reach out to people in the back end, get it fixed immediately. What we don't want to see happen is allowing students to proceed forward and complete an assessment without their accommodation that's been determined. That is a denial of faith for the student. And so as soon as you notice something ain't happening, reach out to Jessica and she can help navigate, right, those next steps of what to do, right? When, at what point do we call parents, right? Notifying the special ed director, all of those things, because that can be a pretty serious situation when that happens.
Yeah, so if I was an assessment director, my communication to my LEA would be contact me, the assessment director, and then you as the assessment director reach out to the state so we can see what moves we can do to remedy those situations when they occur. And they will occur. They occur every year.
Next slide.
So I think
And probably next slide.
probably alternate assessments. Yep.
Anything else you need to add?
Nope, it was just kind of that reminder who they're for, right? Or students with significant cognitive disabilities, not just struggling students, right? Students that are going to have a hard time on our gen ed assessments. You can go ahead to the next one. This was just kind of honing more in. Here are the alternate assessments that are happening right now, right? You've got PEEP and KEEP and Acadience, reading and math. Again, with the 23 date. What's up with that? Dear Lord. I've been in too many things, too
We're
much.
way behind on entering our data.
Okay, next slide. And then just kind of what do you need to do for DLM, right? Getting access to Educator Portal. I have seen all of your fabulous emails come in, so give me a couple days to get through. I'll make sure everybody by, next week gets those accounts set up, right? Find your special ed director, navigate things. Please get your special education director to the table with you at that Building Connections. We will try to get that information out to them this next week, but they have not even seen that date. Sign up for it. So I'm really relying on you guys to get that to your special ed people this year. Students that need alternate assessments, get that 1% flag set in DLM. We are hoping to start rostering students in the next week or so, start loading them in. So
The loading of students into DLM is more of an art than a science, really. So
yep.
give us some patience with that.
I think that's it. I don't think you had anything else. It's pretty much just kind of the same stuff from the slides. Right, training courses.
All right. It's me again. I just have, you can hit the next slide. I just asserted what to do if you don't see a student rostered for assessments. It's just the same thing that was before. UTREX errors, be patient, check your records, just that general stuff. This is for students enrolled in one school. Spoiler alert for the Building Assessment Connections. We are going to be talking about students that are enrolled in more than one school at the same time in the same classes. So we'll cover dually enrolled students later. And next is just resources again. Just check them out. And that's it for me.
I'm going to add real fast. I think you and I today have probably had 4 or 5 emails saying students are missing an ALO. Like, please communicate that out. Like, if they're not there, please, please, please do not add them to the system.
Oh, yes. No manual student entry. And I told your UTREX people this last week, so they know they're not supposed to be doing it.
Please go check to see why they're not rostering by going in and looking at their UTREX and the data in your SIS system, because that's what's preventing it. If it's everybody, that's a different problem.
Yes.
Please let us know if it's everybody. If it's a couple of students, it's their specific information.
Because if there's
accurate.
misalignment between what you put in there manually and what we send, you could lose your results. And
Oh, see my next 3 emails, students missing, students missing.
yeah.
We'll also do that.
Please don't put that in there.
I have a question on that. If we opted into the CSV through Move It, do we need to continue to do that for new teachers that are coming in, like if we have turnover, or?
We are clarifying that with ALO, what the best process is going to be
Okay.
for that. So please look for that in an upcoming AD memo once we have clarified. So we actually were discussing that yesterday. And they had to take it to a different team to determine exactly the best process for that.
Because we don't want to lose anything. We're being extra cautious so that we don't overwrite a bunch of information
Yes.
that you've already put in there. You've done your hard work, and people want to wreck it.
And on our end, we know that we're not going to keep updating those.
Yes,
So we have to, we're trying to figure out the best process for that.
Is there a chance that the initial one would be the CSV and then the new ones would just sync with UTREX, or would it not do both?
No.
Okay.
No, it's most likely going to be something manually on your side that you're going to be doing to enter those users. I just want to make sure we get the process correct so that it all comes together.
Yeah, let's talk for just a minute about UTREX, because this is going to be implicated in all of your almost all of your assessments. Not all of them, but almost all of them. The data transfer then comes from your student information system each night through the UTREX process. Teacher email addresses, so work email addresses, are not included in that daily upload. So your question about will it automatically be done? if we're using Cactus email addresses, which was our original intention and was what we do with Utah Aspire Plus, we can access that and teachers can update that in their Cactus and then we just updates in your assessment platform. The teacher email addresses, as of right now, aren't included in the UTREX nightly submission. Most of our systems then, if there's a problem with your UTREX submission, and sometimes it could be it fails from your LEA and nothing goes, or sometimes there might just be individual students that their records somehow fail. That's the most common cause of a student not displaying in any number of your assessment platforms. So whoever has responsibility for UTREX, there's not, from what I know, there's not an automated system that warns, there's not an alarm that goes off. Whoever does that says, you got to fix your UTREX submission. It's usually caught when somebody sees the problem and then says, oh, what's the reason of this problem? And then, oh, our UTREX submission failed. So whoever oversees your UTREX submission in your LEA, you'll want to become connected, at least knowledgeable with that person, and talk to them about how they monitor. There are people in the state that have a process built into their system where they manually check it each day. They have somebody assigned to see did our UTREX submission go through or not. But that's an important process that affects almost all of our assessment platforms.
And the same thing works with Utah Compose, with UTREX, because it comes through UTREX Trail, and you cannot add teacher accounts from an admin level. The teachers have to register and go through the registration process or it doesn't sync. And it's always hard for, a lot of admins really like to really help their teachers, and they're like, oh, I'll add all the accounts in, but it doesn't sync with UTREX. And so they still have to go through the process anyway. And so that's a really important thing to say as well, to remind them. And I always remind anybody who asks me for a new account. And for those of you who are new, one of the things you probably want to do that we didn't mention yet is that if you would like, you need a UTIPS admin account or a Utah Compose admin account, or, the RISE and the, all of our accounts. If you're new and you haven't really communicated with us much, you probably need to reach out to us so that we can make sure you're added to everything, because we need to add you in as the LEA ADs to all of our systems. That includes WIDA and everything. WIDA, Utah Compose, UTIPS, all of those. So you'll want to communicate. Send us an email and say, we have a pretty good welcome when Amy has a pretty good email. Like, here's all the things you need to know. But it's also really important to reach out to us, and you can email me and I can forward that email off to everyone if you need to. You don't have to send 74 emails, just one of us, and we'll make sure everybody knows. But that's a really important thing that just hit me that we probably need to talk about that we didn't mention before. So, okay, next slide. Oh, always, please, if you have any roster questions, shoot me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Next slide.
Okay, some of this stuff is a little bit of repeat from this morning, so I will fly through that stuff, but welcome to WIDA. WIDA is our English language proficiency assessments, so students that are English learners. The biggest thing that I will say as a new AD, communicate with people in other departments. I will always share this information with the ALS directors. That's what we say, alternative language services. Sometimes you'll say EL directors, or maybe Title III specialists. It just depends on your LEA. You will definitely need to decide who is owning what. So, because this is an assessment where lines a lot of times will get blurred. So talk to your technology coordinators, your ALS and Title III folks, and also just test administrators. There are also links to some really important websites. I'm going to say that our USBE WIDA website, there is a link about assessment. It's assessment guidance on there that answers a lot of the unique questions that we get, okay? So definitely look over the WIDA tab. And also, please just give yourself a good year to be green in this and learn the process. It's a lot, and ask questions, please. It doesn't bother us. That's what we're here for, is to support you. So next slide. The tests that we have for WIDA are the screener, access, and then alternate access. In Utah, students should only be screened once if they come to Utah schools and stay in Utah schools, okay? If they leave the state of Utah, then they may need to be screened more than once because other states have different criteria and different programs. So again, that guidance that I just referenced on our WIDA tab on our USBE page will really specify when you need to rescreen students in Utah. If a student qualifies as EL, that magic number for qualification, 5.0 for identification. If a student is a 5.0 or higher, they are considered proficient on the screener and they do not qualify for services. A 4.9 or lower does qualify as English language learner and they qualify for services and should be marked in your SIS as EL. Okay. You screen students all year long, so the screener is always available all year long. While we are on online state, paper screeners are available for students that might be recently arrived, have no technology experience, or might have significant cognitive disabilities, and a paper screener is required. So I see in the chat, what about first semester kindergarten, since they only do listening and speaking? Yep, you only administer the listening and speaking domain to kindergarten students in the first semester. You do not have to do the other domains later on. If a kindergarten student enrolls in your LEA from another state during the second semester, you will give them all 4 domains. Okay. Figuring out what to give students and when is in the test administration manual for screeners on page 14. And again, for kindergarten, you will get an overall composite score just even with those 2 domains. So you can still determine if they qualify. And the calculator is online through your WIDA Secure Portal account. Again, qualifying students will take the annual access till they're deemed proficient, and then there is also an alternate access that went through a major overhaul this year, hence why we discussed earlier today the reports are delayed. As we get closer to access, I will be giving more and more information. You will be getting very detailed emails from WIDA and DRC, even with screenshots to walk you through how to do everything, trainings, online, self-paced, webinars, they will all be available for you all.
Megan?
Yes.
We only have 3 minutes left.
Oh, okay. So if you need an account for a WIDA Secure Portal, please let me know. If you need an account for AMS, please let me know. Once you at the district level have those accounts set up, you are going to be in charge of setting up everyone else in your district with the accounts that they need. So please, the last thing I will say, trainings need to be done annually for those administering the tests. You are responsible for keeping track of your test administrators doing the trainings. You can do that in your WIDA Secure Portal account. Please reach out to myself for any questions and Tracy for any students that are duly identified as an English language student and a student with significant cognitive disabilities. So
what we're going to do is we will send the slide deck out to everyone after, because we only have a couple minutes late, but I do want to give people time. If anybody has any questions, Michelle said, I'm in the Data Gateway. The links under Data Gateway training are not working. Data Gateway is actually under the purview of the data and statistics team, Michelle. So if you're in there trying to access a training under Data Gateway, you probably want to reach out to Aaron Bruff. And his team I'm typing his email in right now into the chat for you. And reach out to him to let him know. And then they he'll put somebody on that since you can't get into it.
And I don't have any trainings in the data gateway. All WIDA trainings are available through the WIDA secure portal.
The data gateway trainings are probably referring to trainings for.
Well,
the
there
data
is one
gateway.
that says
Is there?
WIDA Access User Guide under Data Gateway Training, and that is probably just in the wrong place.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, there's also some user guide to SAGE reports.
Yes, Sage special codes and tool guides.
Old things.
There's a
Okay.
guide for how you
Any-
download the
I
access
know.
reports.
Any other questions from anybody out there, since we're gonna have to end our webinar, we promised everybody 1 hour and, and by the way, if everybody's interested in doing this for a while, we're fine doing some office hours, every other week or something, if that would be helpful for you, please let me know if that would be useful, because we can always, jump onto a webinar and do, if there's, we get specific questions. I'm guessing ALO is going to be a pretty hot topic for a while. We may need to do some. Teresa and Jared and Sydney have literally been like training 24 hours a day. This is the first time I've seen them in like weeks and weeks and weeks because they've been gone. So we're just glad to see them in person, but we are happy to do this and provide this training for you. And the AD resource guide gives you the contact information for specific people to contact. You can always reach out to me and I will be always the coordinator of who gets the information because I know who it goes to. So thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate your time and good luck.